Hello everyone and welcome back to TowerGate. It is TowerGate day number 374, Monday, March the 19th, 2018. Thank you so much for tuning in. Well, I want to thank everyone for all the well wishes and thoughts and prayers in the comments section and some really good advice. I'm doing my best to take all that, including some advice I got to take a day off and not do a video. And so I did that yesterday, but back at it today. And not a whole lot major has happened in the last 48 hours since my last video, but a couple things mostly relating to the fallout from McCabe's firing. And so I'm going to go through some of that and cover a few other things, and we'll get on with it from there. So anyway, probably one of the biggest things, I guess, that's come out in the last just 24 hours or so is this statement that McCabe put out after he was fired, where he essentially incriminates Comey. He basically says that Comey and Main Justice knew. Now, he would be talking about Sally Yates in this particular case, because remember, McCabe was working very closely with Sally Yates, and we know from watching their testimony in front of Congress that it was Yates and McCabe and Bill Priestap who were really running this whole effort on Michael Flynn. And Yates was the one who was describing how all this was coming down, and they had discovered this from these unmaskings, and they'd heard this conversation of Flynn and had all this other information. And this is what, according to Sally Yates, made them all go, oh man, we're freaking out, you know, we got to do something. And they were looking into all this, and that's when she's describing all the things that they did, which, and as her statement played out, of course, it was all really sounded like the sort of the three main people that she was sort of in this cabal with to get after Flynn was her and McCabe and Priestap, and that's why they had Peter's been stroking us go over and interview Flynn, even though he didn't actually know it was like an interview. That's where they got him, I guess, lying, supposedly, even though what he lied about was not criminal at all. He's allowed to talk to the Russian ambassador. He didn't, you know, what he apparently didn't come totally clean on was they had asked him about was the topic of sanctions or lifting sanctions. Was that something that came up? And apparently he said no, or what have you, and apparently they had heard some unmasked call where the subject of the sanctions, and Flynn had said something like, well, don't worry about the sanctions right now, we're getting ready to have a new administration to change over and things will be different. So apparently this is where the alleged lie took place, is about the sanctions and the phone call, not the fact that Flynn was talking to Kislyak, but the fact that he had who had misled them in these questions when he was being interviewed about whether or not that this had something to do with sanctions. It was really a setup is what it was. And it was Sally Yates that was really driving this and pushing this. And it was working with McCabe and Priestap. As far as we know, Priestap was not involved in the interview. It was McCabe and someone else. I don't think it was Baker, and I don't think it was Rybicki. It was someone else who had this interview with Flynn. But Sally Yates was the one who was really running that particular show to push for this interview. She's the one who probably told McCabe to have Priestap or whoever, or Peter's been stroking us, to go over there and interview Flynn and get him somehow to lie or press him or whatever about whether or not we had promised to remove sanctions on Russia or something like that. So that is really what was going on, and that was kind of what the conversation was about, is Sally Yates was being interviewed. So we get McCabe, and he says in his statement that Comey and Main Justice, we're talking about Sally Yates at this point, is what he's referring to, knew about sharing information with the Wall Street Journal reporter, and McCabe is saying that was okayed by the FBI's Public Affairs and Legal Counsel, and that he had made Comey aware of that Comey was aware of that. And the problem is that back in May of 2017, when Comey was in hearings in Congress, he said that he never had been an anonymous source or authorized someone else to be an anonymous source to either the Trump Russia or Clinton email or Clinton Foundation investigation. So here we have McCabe coming out and saying, oh, it was cleared with Comey, it was cleared with main justice, which would be Yates, cleared with his bosses, pre-step, the whole 9 yards. So this is what McCabe is saying, is that this alleged leak, which is what apparently got him fired, lying about this multiple times. He's saying that the actual act of this leak, which he doesn't describe as a leak, he describes as sharing information. But he says the sharing of this information with the Wall Street Journal reporter was okayed, approved by Comey, FBI's Public Affairs and Legal Counsel, as well as Main Justice. So that seems to be what McCabe is saying is true. Now, of course, he doesn't talk about the fact that he allegedly misled or lied to FBI investigators about that. And, of course, we haven't heard from Comey. He hasn't tweeted anything further. All we know is that back in May of 2017, Comey said he never had been an anonymous source or authorized someone else to be an anonymous source to leaking or sharing information with anyone in the media regarding Trump Russia, Clinton email, or Clinton Foundation investigations. So there you go. We'll have to see exactly how that all shakes out. But it doesn't look good for Comey there. And this would be what? Lie number 4? We would now have caught Comey in? So getting back now to Flynn, we recently learned that Peter Benstrokenis and Luce Lisa Page were having this conversation about that dinner party with Judge Contreras. And the fact that they wanted to have this meeting and this dinner. Really what Benstrokenis wants is to have a one-on-one conversation with Judge Contreras, who we believe is one of the FISA court judges, who may have been the one who authorized one of the wiretaps, which led to the surveillance on Flynn. And we find out that Peter Benstrokenis is a friend and has a good relationship with Contreras. Now they're talking about the fact that Peter Benstrokenis wants to have this dinner. Really wants a one-on-one, but to disguise it, they need to have a dinner party so that there's 6 or 7 people there, and so it doesn't look like it's a one-on-one. But really, that's what is intended, is for Benstrokenis to be able to have a one-on-one with Judge Contreras, and to disguise it or mask it by having other people and having it be a dinner party. Now, keep in mind, this was discovered by Jim Jordan and Mark Meadows, but it was redacted, a lot of it. They had to go over to the Justice Department and look at it over there to see and get the actual name, which the name, once it was unredacted, turned out to be the judge. And keep in mind, there's over 50,000 emails that the Department of Justice is still going through and redacting, and that's why they're being held up. And this is only from like 3,000 emails that they've seen. There's 50,000 more they're still waiting for. So just imagine what else more we are going to learn when they finally get to look at all of this. Obviously, they're trying to run the clock out because the name of the game for the deep state is to run the clock out. To hope that they can win the 2018 elections, in which case the Democrats would take over Congress. Then they would then head the committees. They can stop all these investigations, completely spin it, and then turn around and have impeachment hearings on Trump. So everything is based on, both strategies are based on the 2018 elections. The Republicans need to get the ball rolling because they need to expose these crimes before the 2018 election, which would hopefully keep the Democrats from winning back Congress. But the Democrats, of course, want the opposite. They want to drag it all out so that none of these revelations come out, so that they can win the 2018 elections, so they can totally turn the tables, take over these committees, and move for impeachment hearings. So everything right now is a political game between the two, the deep state versus these three Republican committee chairmen, as well as members of the Freedom Caucus and those who would support the president. So it's quite a political bit of theater that's playing out right now, and so much is on the line. I mean, there's so much on the line for both sides, and it's very, very critical as to how this is handled. And a commenter on one of my previous videos actually mentioned this as something I've talked about before. The way this is being done by Nunes, Grassley, and Goodlatte, it's very, very carefully being coordinated. These guys are not just stumbling through this. They have thought this through very, very carefully. They understand that they can't get ahead of it or they'll blow the whole investigation. They can't go too fast. They can't go too slow. It's very, very difficult how they're going to have to do this. And this is why they want a special counsel also. But it's a very tricky maneuver, and we saw just from how the media and how the left reacted to just the firing of McCabe, how they reacted and what you can expect. And now you understand more about why Sessions is so nervous. When he was told about a year ago that indictments coming down against high-level officials of the Obama administration, the Hillary Clinton and people around her, could result in massive civil uprisings, civil unrest, and that sort of thing. Because remember that the Clintons are connected to the Soros and all that money they have. All these grassroots organizations, so-called grassroots organizations, that they fund, they can put a lot of people on the street. They can put a lot of angry, violent people on the street. They can feed this thing. And it's in the media's best interest to pour gasoline on the fire. Because, as we know, the media, in a lot of cases, is involved in this. It's not like the left-wing media is sitting here on the sidelines as spectators watching all this go down. They've been active participants in it. Their asses are on the line as well. So this is a very, very tricky bit of business that we're watching here, and it is. Do not underestimate what I've said before about how ugly this thing is going to get, my friends. This is going to be far, far bigger than Watergate, the biggest scandal in political history by far. And you can see dozens and dozens of very high-level, high-ranking officials, including Clinton, various other people, maybe Obama himself, being indicted for something like literally a coup, is essentially what we're talking about here. With a terminology that they'll use to describe it, will be used differently by different people, but essentially this is what we'll be looking at. Not to be taken lightly, and I think that we all need to be prepared for the fallout. This is really concerning to Sessions. It's really concerning to Goodlatte and to Gowdy and to all these guys. I mean, they know this. I mean, they're not stupid. They understand exactly what it is that they're embarking on here, and they do know what the fallout could be and the situation they could find themselves in, and none of them really want to see the country set ablaze. But the perps have everything riding on this. There's nothing they won't do, nothing, including fomenting rioting and civil uprisings. They got everything on the line, and so it's very tricky business. And I do expect that, as I've said many times before, I don't know if some of you are quite prepared for what I'm telling you. Could very likely play out in terms of violence, uprisings, civil unrest. You know, I know we all want to see the truth come out. I do. I know most of you do, if not all of you. We want to see the truth come out. We want to see the perps held accountable. But we all need to be perfectly prepared for the fact that these people aren't going to just allow themselves to be served up and have to face justice. They're not going to go quietly. They're going to make as much noise, raise as much hell, create as much misery, whatever it takes. These people are nothing, they're not above doing any of this. And so when I say that prepare yourselves as we move forward down this road, that when indictments start coming down, remember, McCabe just got fired. Imagine when they start indicting people like McCabe, Yates, Comey, Lynch, Rice, Powers, maybe Clinton. When you start having people, dozens and dozens, not to mention the dozens and dozens who are unnamed characters right now, people whose names we don't even know, who are also involved. We have State Department officials. We have possibly the head of the CIA, John Brennan, the DCI, Clapper, probably others in those organizations. We probably have media people who will come up on this. I mean, there's a lot of people that could be caught into this, lassoed up in this thing, and it's going to be unbelievable. The biggest political scandal in history, and it's going to be very, very ugly, and we need to all be prepared. We do need to see justice done, but I can promise you it is not going to be pretty. It's not. It's not going to be pretty. But it needs to happen. Buckle your seatbelts. Turbulence. Dead ahead. We saw how dangerous this thing is becoming now. We also had, in the wake of McCabe being fired, we had various people from the deep state who are themselves terrified of what's coming for them, coming out and making their comments, such as we had John Brennan. I'm sure you all read that statement he made. We had Eric Holder. And, of course, the comment made by Samantha Power was even more, I'd say, threatening to the president. What did she say? You know, it's not a good idea to piss off John Brennan. What does that mean? What exactly does that mean, Samantha Power? Why would you say that in a tweet? What do you mean it's not a good idea to piss off the former CIA director? You know, it's not a really good idea to piss off the sitting president either. Probably not a good idea to piss off the current CIA director. I don't know, but if it were me and I'm the Secret Service, I would be going and having a talk with Brennan, Samantha Power, and Eric Holder. And I would be having a little conversation with them if I'm the Secret Service and letting them know that they better cool it. I would be asking Samantha Power exactly what she meant by that comment. It's not a good idea to piss off John Brennan. I would ask her what she meant by that. I certainly would. And I wouldn't be surprised if some of these people don't get a contact with the Secret Service to let them know that they need to tone it down. Those things sound very close to threats. James Kallstrom, the former deputy FBI director, told Maria Bartiromo on Sunday morning that it was a frame-up. Good. There's a reason why I did a video and laid out why this operation was a frame-up, and the reason why I use the term frame-up. I do it because I want it to catch on. Because right now, no one has put a real clear, simple, easy 2 words on what happened out there so that people can really understand it. No one's, it's kind of in the nebulous. I wanted to make it very crystal clear what happened. It was a frame-up. People know what a frame-up is. And when you put it in those terms, people can understand it. That's why I used the term frame-up and laid it out. And it's very good to see that the Deputy FBI Director told Maria Bartiromo that it was a frame-up. Because now when you put it in those terms, people can understand it. And Nunes and everyone else that understands what's going on needs to use that term, frame-up. They should use that term day after day after day after day until it's clear in everyone's mind that this was a frame-up, something people can relate to and understand. This is why I use the term, and this is why I think the former Deputy FBI Director Kallstrom used the term, because he understands the same thing. It needs to become crystal clear in people's mind exactly what we're talking about. And we're talking about a frame-up. Well done. We also learned in the last 24 hours that McCabe admits that he pressured Rodenstein to appoint Mueller after Comey was fired. Now that calls into question Rodenstein, because now that we know that McCabe had what he had going on, he's the one who pressured Rodenstein to appoint Mueller after Comey was fired. Like I say, Flynn, they're going to drop the charges against Flynn. This little detail that we learned, in addition to everything else, about Peter's been stroking us, his relationship with this Judge Contreras, the fact that they were going to have this little dinner party. We don't know what other conversations they've had because there's other information that we haven't seen yet, stuff that we don't know, but we can assume that there may have been, and likely were, more conversations. It's likely that he was one of the FISA judges. This, on top of the fact that the new judge in that case has ordered Mueller to present any exculpatory evidence that they have and turn it over to Flynn's team, which means evidence that could exonerate Flynn. I'm telling you, the case against Michael Flynn is going to be dropped. That will be very damaging to the Mueller investigation, because Michael Flynn is still the biggest fish, and it's still the only thing that's really tied to, in a way, Trump-Russia. You know, the Papadopoulos thing... the Papadopoulos thing, we still don't know the full backstory to that, and exactly who Papadopoulos was working for, exactly what his role was, or any of that. It's still kind of out there. I think we'll learn at some point. And, of course, Manafort stuff all goes back 10 years into tax issues and money laundering and various other things. The only thing that's really kind of Trump-Russia related, and the main thing that gave Mueller, some legitimacy to keep moving forward, was the Flynn pleading guilty. But when you take this into consideration, it sure looks like to me that Flynn is going to have the charges against him dropped, and that's going to be a big blow to Mueller. And then, I believe, when the Inspector General report comes out, and it lays out the criminal activity within the DOJ and the FBI, and the people who were involved were all the same people who were involved in the whole Flynn setup. When you take a look at all of that, I think that the IG report, along with this latest information, is going to pretty much doom Mueller. I don't know how he can continue. How can he go on with this investigation when you find out that all the people he's relying on for their testimony, for the information they got, and everything else is all completely, it's spoiled, because all these people are likely going to be indicted. The IG is going to come out with his report and point out all the crimes that were committed, and then probably within 2 to 5 days, the indictments will come down, and they will likely come down on Comey, on Yates, on McCabe, probably Ben Strokinus, Luce Lisa Page, others. And these are all people central to the Mueller investigation, which got Flynn in the first place. I don't know how the Mueller investigation will survive after the IG report comes out and all these people are implicated and later indicted for their crimes. I think that the Mueller probe is on its last leg unless he pulls something out of his ass at the last moment. And I don't know what that would be, but we'll have to watch very closely. But we're hearing that they expect that the IG report will come out sometime in April. So we'll see. First it was March, then April. We'll find out. But as soon as this IG report comes out, we are going to know a lot more about which direction this is all going to go. And I also believe that I think that Sessions desperately needs the IG report to come out before he appoints a special counsel. I think that's what he needs. He needs the IG report to come out. He needs this person that he's got in there right now, which apparently has prosecutorial abilities, to levy these indictments. He needs that to happen to give him cover to appoint the special counsel. And I think that that's what Sessions needs. But the pressure continues to build and build and build. And so I wouldn't be surprised that if Sessions isn't talking to the IG and probably saying, hey, things are getting really, really hot. I'm under tremendous pressure. We need to get your IG report out there. And, we don't have a lot more time because I'm under tremendous pressure. And I think that there may be something like that going on in the background. I don't know. But we know that Sessions talks to the Inspector General, and they're in communication. So, and of course, Sessions has his guy that he put in there that he hasn't named, but somebody who's been with Justice for 30 years outside of D.C., and that's probably the person that Sessions is in communicado with, who's keeping him posted on what's going on. So I think that we are definitely going to get a special counsel. I just think that Sessions has to have the right cover to make it look, everything has to look like to Sessions that Sessions' hand was forced. Because I believe he thinks this is the only way he can avoid the civil unrest and everything else that's coming. And I think it's coming regardless. I mean, you can see how the media responded and how the Democrats responded to McCabe being fired. They completely ignored the fact that that came from the FBI's own internal recommendation. So they're not going to report straight on the story. It's not going to happen. They're going to spin it any way they have to spin it, because you have to keep in mind, as I said before, in a lot of ways, these left-wing media outlets are involved. They're not just spectators. They're players in everything that went down in the frame-up. Another thing that's just mind-boggling that we learn, and this comes from Judicial Watch, and it's not something new. It's something that they actually released a few months back, but now they're bringing back to the forefront, because now, in this new light, it needs closer examination once again. But Judicial Watch, Tom Fitton, has reintroduced evidence that Judicial Watch obtained in November of 2017 that shows Jill McCabe received $700,000 in campaign funds from the Clinton bagman Terry McAuliffe. What we learn that's kind of new, or we're seeing in a different light now, is that Jill McCabe, Dr. Jill McCabe, Andrew McCabe's wife, was recruited by Lieutenant Governor Northam's office to run for that state Senate seat in Virginia. Now here's where it gets fascinating. Who gets recruited? Well, I guess certain people get recruited, but she was never a politician. Why Jill McCabe? Why would the Lieutenant Governor's office want to recruit a doctor whose wife is Deputy FBI Director when she's never really been involved in any major way in politics, never run for any political office? She was never, a local council person or anything like that. Why would they go to this woman and say, hey, you need to run for state senate? Oh, and by the way, Terry McAuliffe, who's connected to all kinds of Clinton money, is going to drop $700 large on you to help you do it. So Jill McCabe is recruited by Lieutenant Governor Ralph Northam's office to run for that Senate seat in Virginia. Now look at the timing. Let's go through the timing. On March the 2nd, 2015, the story broke that the Rotten Reverend Clinton had used a private email server. That was on March the 2nd, 2015. We learned Hillary Clinton had a private email server. 5 days later, March 7th, Jill McCabe is recruited to run in the Virginia Senate race. Then, 5 more days later, on the 12th, McAuliffe and Clinton-aligned groups donate $700,000 to McCabe's campaign, which is 40% of the total money she raised. And we learn now that Comey and Michael Corton, based on emails, text that we've read, that Corton and Comey knew every bit of this, and they knew exactly how this all was done. They knew about the date that it became public knowledge that Hillary Clinton had the private email server. 5 days later, she's recruited. 5 days after that, here comes the money. Well, it's pretty obvious that someone in the Clinton group knew that it would likely be Andrew McCabe who would be handling the email investigation, looking into her having this private server. So isn't it awfully coincidental that Hillary, it becomes knowledge she has this private server which she now knows that the FBI is going to have to investigate, and then 5 days later the wife of the person who's probably going to be running that investigation gets I guess she was drafted to run for a Senate seat, and then gets $700,000 dropped in her lap. And keep in mind, when these races are over, whether you win or lose, you get to keep any money left over. It's your money. She lost that race. I wonder how much she spent. And I wonder how much of that $700,000 went into the pockets of the McCabes. I mean, it doesn't get much more coincidental than that, does it? I mean, imagine that. Clinton, it becomes knowledge that Clinton has a private email server. Public. It's all over the news wires. Everyone now knows Hillary Clinton had a private server set up in her home. 5 days later, the person who is going to be investigating it, his wife, is essentially, what's the word they use? Recruited. The wife of the person who's going to be investigating it at the FBI, his wife is recruited to run for the seat. And a person who never had shown any interest before in running for any political office, all of a sudden she is recruited and given a boatload of money. Now, she probably had no chance of winning because she was kind of like coming out of the blue. Not a person anybody associated with politics in Virginia. Most people didn't even know who she was, other than the fact that she's a doctor married to the deputy FBI director. She comes into all this money. Of course, she loses. But they get to keep that money. Man, oh man. Unbelievable. There are so many crimes. So many crimes. And this was also being investigated too by the... this was being investigated even before any of the 26, this was being investigated long before any of this other stuff. I mean, this was some of the very first stuff that was being investigated about McCabe, along with these other things that he was being investigated for. He was under 3 investigations before any of these other things popped up on the radar screen as far as his possible criminal activities regarding the Clinton email, the Clinton Foundation, passing information to the media, lying about it, being involved in the insurance policy, all these things. He was involved in many, many things. So, just extraordinary what we're learning, and it's all going to find its way. It's all going to air itself out at some point, and it's going to get ugly. That's all I'm going to say. It's going to get very, very ugly. Fasten your seatbelt and prepare for what's coming. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'll be back tomorrow. And by the way, yes, I am feeling a little better. It's one day at a time at this point. Feeling much better than I did yesterday. And thanks for sticking with me. I'll see you guys tomorrow. Bye.